An aero helmet is obviously designed for aero gains, but how much of an advantage do you actually get from using an aero helmet over using a road helmet? Well, in a wind tunnel, this is going to win hands down. But in reality, there are so many factors to consider when you're choosing what helmet to use for your next race. Well, we're going to be looking into those factors in a moment, and then we're going to finish it off with a head-to-head time trial versus. Riding position is often overlooked, and it's easy to think that wearing an aero helmet is going to make you more aerodynamic overall, and that isn't always so. If you've got a very high up position or you move your head around a lot, then it can end up being detrimental. And you also need to consider the type of course you're going to be racing and the conditions, because being super aero at home on your turbo or on smooth flat roads is one thing, but if your course is going to have sharp corners, rough surfaces, steep hills, or even really windy, anything that's going to mean that you're going to have to come off your aero bars and onto your base bars, then you're probably going to be better off with just a normal road helmet. Talking of the external factors, the weather and the climate should also be taken into consideration. Obviously, aero helmets don't have quite as much ventilation as a road helmet does, so if you are doing a long race in hot, humid conditions, then you might find you start to overheat. Although some aero helmets will have more ventilation, and some even have gaps so you can pour water over your head. But the opposite goes if you're racing in cold climate, and I've actually enjoyed the benefits of an aero helmet when racing a TT in the UK and it's a bit chilly. And to be honest, I'm quite looking forward to wearing it today because it's a little bit cold. Okay, it's time to look at the numbers. We can't ignore the cost difference between these two helmets. The aero helmet will cost more than the road helmet, and if you're only going to be buying one, you're probably going to get more use out of your road helmet. Although having said that, there is now an option on the market that sits somewhere in between the two, and that is the Aero road helmet, such as the Cask Infinity. And whilst we're sticking with numbers, it is worth mentioning the weight. The difference is pretty negligible, to be honest, and I can't really notice it holding them here, although apparently the road helmet is slightly lighter than the aero helmet. Most aero helmets will cover your ears like this one, so it will reduce your hearing slightly. But hopefully in a race you shouldn't really need to hear that much anyway, and I personally quite like it because it helps me get into the zone and really get into that race mode. And the same goes a little bit for your vision, as it will slightly reduce your peripheral vision. Comfort should play an important part when you're choosing what helmet to race in, and it comes down to personal preference, so I'd highly recommend that you try before you buy. Now, for example, in Kona, I actually opted for my road helmet because I felt that the benefit of keeping cool would outweigh any aero benefits. Take into account the distance of your races. The shorter it is, the less significant the difference is going to be between the two. And it might take a little getting used to taking your aero helmet on and off, which could cost you a few seconds. So there's just another factor that you might want to consider. So I'm going to do 2 runs holding an average of 250 watts for 2K up the road. First I'm going to do it in my road helmet, and then I'm going to do it in my aero helmet. Well, I think it's time to get started. Okay, pretty accurate, 247 on the average watts, and the time was 3 minutes 39 seconds. And I mean, it is a little bit breezy out there, so that last bit I just had to come onto my base bars as well because the hill gets a bit steep, but try to stay pretty close to my target. Yes, just missed a couple of seconds there, I think, as I couldn't quite get it to pause. But interestingly, it is quicker, although by the time I pressed the button, only 2 seconds quicker. So that was a 3:37. Now that does sound good, but Let's have a look. My watts are higher. I actually averaged 260 on that run. I'm not really sure how, because it didn't feel like I was working any harder and it felt a bit smoother, but maybe I just got my race helmet on and I got into race zone a bit too much, I'm not sure. But as you can see, there's water on my visor and it did rain a little bit, and I think the wind has picked up, so I guess you've got to take that into consideration. There was very little difference between the road helmet and the aero helmet. There are a few things to consider though. It was a short course, we only did it once with each. I wasn't quite as accurate with my watts as I'd hoped to be, and the weather was a little bit changeable. So I think that does call for a more thorough investigation in the future, but sadly that was all we had time for today. Well, if you've enjoyed this and you want more videos from GTN, just hit the globe to subscribe. And if you want to look at another comparison, Mark actually compared a time trial bike with a road bike, and that video is just here. And then if you want to see some tips on how to get more aero as a piece with pro triathlete, their air knots, just here.